June 11th, 1997, 25 nautical miles north of Guam. USNS National Pride, a U.S. Navy strategic sealift vessel. Displacement, 44,330 tons. Crew, 38 civilians and 10 technicians. Cargo, classified. 10:30 Zulu. Brief radio contact indicates a rendezvous with a ship of similar size, origin unknown. 10:35 Zulu. All contact with National Pride is lost. 10:40 Zulu. NSA intercepts a message from a known Iranian asset operating in Canada. The message mentions successful hijacking of National Pride by friends. At the same time, a satellite tracking station, Andersen Air Force Base, Guam, comes under attack from unidentified assailants. The perimeter is breached. Guards are overwhelmed, captured. Simultaneously, Kaena Point Satellite Tracking Station, the island of Oahu, is attacked and overrun. 11:30 Zulu. National Pride docks at Guam, unscheduled and unauthorized. An individual known as Vahid boards the vessel. Shortly after, using the vessel's radio, he reports success to the contact in Canada. Vahid's team just pulled off the largest attack on United States soil since World War II. The execution was flawless. Most importantly, nobody in the American government found out what was going on. The military barely understood it was under attack before multiple bases were captured. But Vahid does not realize how close he was to failure. 3 hours before the start of the operation, 7:33 Zulu, Deputy Director of the NSA, Thomas McDermott, arrives at his office in Fort Meade, Maryland, USA. He knows something very bad is about to happen. It's the middle of the night. The parking lot is empty. In the entire complex of buildings, only one room is lit, one cubicle. McDermott enters and confronts a man sitting there, Richard Marshall, legal counsel working at the NSA. McDermott knows him personally, but also he's heard of rumors, office talk of a spy in the building, a sabotage operation to undermine the entire communications network of the United States Pacific Command. If such an operation succeeded, Washington could lose contact with all bases in the Pacific. All of them. An adversary would be able to launch another Pearl Harbor, and the DoD would be none the wiser. And now Marshall is right here, in front of him, sweaty, distraught, nervous. He's up to something bad. You know why I'm here, right? Marshall asks. McDermott comes closer and reaches out for a handshake. Yes, of course. He's in on it. The deputy director of the NSA is in on it. The whole operation. The largest attack on United States soil since World War II. An attack which took down all communications of the American military and made it powerless to resist actual military invasion by a foreign state. Only 40 people, including 25 hackers, were involved in it. And it took them 4 days to hack the entire infrastructure of their own country. From then on, the world will never be the same. There was no rollback. Welcome to the 90s. MTV is showing Beavis and Butthead. You're eating pop cereal straight from the box. And if you're on your best behavior, you have access to the family computer for 1 whole hour. And then you'll probably hear the sound. The World Wide Web is taking shape, a place to learn, play, make friends, but this information superhighway has a bit of a dark side to it. People are slowly getting aware of hacking.
Holy cow.
Usually, this awareness didn't come through personal experience. Very few internet users actually encountered those hackers, but they have seen them on the screen.
Hackers. War games.
Now, this one is a bit more important than the others. Sneakers. A thriller comedy about rogue agents, hackers, spies, and the National Security Agency. In September of 1996, Mike McConnell, the director of the NSA at the time, actually went to a local cinema to see this movie. We don't know if he thought it was any good, but we know that one scene in this movie stuck with him.
The world isn't run by weapons anymore, or energy, or money. It's run by little ones and zeros, little bits of data. It's all just electron.
Generally, by the mid-90s, Everybody understood that information warfare is the future. It's just that nobody knew what this kind of warfare really was. For decades, the NSA viewed it through the lens of signal intelligence, intercepting radio and phone signals, deciphering secret messages, and trying to prevent the adversaries from doing the same. Some added propaganda to that, spreading messages that would misinform the enemy, cause confusion, and disallow your own communication channels from getting corrupted. But what if there was another layer to it? A new medium, a worldwide superhighway that has changed the way information is collected and distributed, a whole new domain where the only kind of warfare you can do is information warfare. Inspired by sneakers, McConnell tried to turn the NSA's attention to that domain. He made screenings of this scene mandatory to the NSA's top officials and established a title of the Director of Information Warfare, a top manager responsible for curating the NSA's efforts into this new field. McConnell left the NSA before its digital transition was complete, but his successor made sure that it got finished. That successor was Kenneth Minahan. Minahan came to the NSA with a million ideas, and cybersecurity was at the top of his priority list.
And attacks against our networks can come from virtually any point in the globe. Like in real estate, its location; in this business, its access. And where the access occurs is where your vulnerability is.
But his excitement was immediately crushed. His power was not absolute. The agency was full of old dinosaurs, and they weren't interested in what he had to say. Minahan's frustration grew. He wanted to prove that the future is really about who controls the information. And soon, he came up with a way to open the eyes of his superiors in a very spectacular manner. But before we discover what Minahan had in store for us, we put a lot of effort into our content. So if you enjoy our explainers, don't forget to subscribe and like the video to support the channel. Thank you. There were a few precursors to what happened later. Minahan drew inspiration from joint operations conducted by Five Eyes. This collection of agencies had a thing called the Coalition Vulnerability Assessment Team, which probed new equipment and networks using standard open-source intelligence techniques. And the word was, its attempts to breach the networks always succeeded. One time, this team accessed the American commander's computer, sending him fake emails and distorting his view of the battlefield, something that, in a real-world scenario, would have led to catastrophic consequences. The Coalition Vulnerability Assessment Team was a crew consisting of just 8 people. 8 hackers would routinely go against the entire Five Eyes and win. Minahan was impressed. Imagine what a bigger team could do. And the NSA already had the beginnings of such a team. It was called the Red Team. In normal military exercises, Red Team is the one that pretends to be the enemy. It uses the adversary's equipment and techniques to make a simulated battle as real as possible. The NSA didn't use its Red Team in exercises. Rather, it was used to probe for vulnerabilities in hardware and software for the Defense Department, and sometimes for the NSA itself. This team was part of the Information Assurance Directorate, the defensive side of the agency. It worked in an isolated chamber near the Friendship Airport called the Pit. But now, it was time for the Red Team to get some real action. Every year, the Pentagon held a war game called Eligible Receiver, an exercise designed to highlight potential threats or opportunities for U.S. defense systems. Those defense systems were going digital, so why not move the exercise into the digital domain too? In 1996, in preparation for Eligible Receiver 1997, Minahan gathered up his Red Team and drew up the plan. The Red Team would play as North Korea, Iran, and Cuba, who teamed up to take on the United States. Don't pay attention to the political implications of all this. It's just a background to a training exercise, not a Tom Clancy novel. These nations would retaliate against U.S. sanctions by launching a coordinated attack on all key infrastructure and organizations in the U.S., including the CIA, State Department, and others. The team would include 25 hackers, all led by Captain Michael Sayre from the U.S. Navy. The simulated attack would consist of 3 phases. In the first phase, the Red Team would simulate an attack on civilian critical infrastructure, with special attention to power grids and emergency communication lines. Imagine it like a terror strike that would preclude a military invasion, sort of a digital opening barrage that starts a war. The second phase would consist of a massive attack on the military's telephone, fax, and computer networks. The goal here was to disrupt command control systems and make it extremely difficult for the generals and the president to communicate. Without communicating, they wouldn't be able to resist a real-world attack that came next. The final phase would include attacking targets in the physical domain, including terror attacks, hostage crisis, satellite tracking, and special operation raids on sea vessels. This is where things get really muddy, though. The declassified NSA documents we have contain lots of information on the first two phases, but the third one? Well, let's get back to it later. Eligible Receiver 97 was a no-notice operation, which meant that only a few officers were aware of what was about to happen. The Red Team worked their regular daytime jobs while focusing on the impending attack during the night. And obviously, strange behavior patterns raised a few eyebrows among the staff. One of the people deeply involved in planning the operation was Richard Marshall, a legal counsel whose job was to make sure that the NSA doesn't break any laws as it demolishes the entire defensive infrastructure of the United States.
Most of us have a tendency to think information warfare, information operations is new. It's not. It's been around for a long, long time.
I continued to work during the day as if I was normal. Continued to work at night in my little private capacity. And there were only a few key people, maybe 4 or 5, that knew what I was doing, that knew I was, quote, being investigated, but also knew that I was legitimately, this was part of my job. And it was just kind of fascinating to be 2 different personalities depending on what time of day it was. I'd go to work during the day and my staff would hear these rumors, there's a spy somewhere in the building. This spy is being investigated. I hope they catch him, type of thing. And of course, I had to, play completely innocent. Oh my God, I hope they find him. This is horrible.
The preparation for the exercise took several months of grueling work. Just like in the hacking movies, bringing the right tools and doing background research was half the job. But the difficult part here was this. The NSA's personnel were forbidden from using any of their tools. They could only perform the attacks with commercially available software, something a regular citizen could purchase off the shelf. On one hand, this made the exercise more realistic. It simulated a real hacker attack on the United States. On the other hand, it would at least partially absolve the NSA from responsibility if something went wrong.
We put together a team of about 25 young hackers. We didn't want to use our best and brightest because we didn't think we needed to. A fascinating group of people. And they were put in a secure area where they basically had to stay night and day because this was a very protected exercise.
Opposing them was the Blue Team, security personnel from the Department of Defense, who just did their regular job protecting military and civilian infrastructure. They had no idea they were participating in the exercise. For them, every incoming attack was as real as it gets. Not that it would matter much, because many of them only found out they were attacked after it was too late. On June 9th, 1997, the exercise kicked off. On the first day, the Red Team penetrated the National Military Command Center, the very nerve center of the whole United States military, the command deck of the President himself. In wartime, every high-level command would go through it. It took 25 hackers half a day to breach. The rest of the Department of Defense's network followed. Most of the hacking was laughably easy. Many systems had password 12345 or ABCDE for a password. In at least 2 cases, the team found documents with passwords in trash cans near the office. Of course, not everything was unprotected. The team did encounter some challenges. One of them was the Joint Staff's Intelligence Directorate. And in this case, they turned to social engineering to make the magic happen. They called the Joint Staff and pretended to be from the Pentagon's IT department, claiming they needed to reset the password. And just like that, they got in. No questions, no follow-ups. Another difficult nut to crack was the United States Indo-Pacific Command. In this particular case, a 4-star general suspected that something abnormal was happening in the system and quickly sent out a classified message to put out the fire. However, the Red Team managed to come up with another plan.
So I said, look guys, let's pretend to be them. Let's send out a message saying that we're them and that everything has been cleared up and continue to use the systems. We did, and it worked, and everybody continued to use the systems. And PACOM at the time thought, oh, hell, everything's good. So the commander of PACOM got on the phone with the director of NSA and said, "We caught you guys coming in and we stopped you, so you can't come in. We win." And we set up the communication link so that the director of NSA could talk directly to the commander of PACOM through his channels that he allegedly had precluded us from getting into, and took over his command briefing just to show him that, okay, my team is smarter than your team.
Until this point, we can only assume that the Red Team was having a blast as they monitored officials running around in confusion and systems crashing down. But the fun was over when Minahan's team accidentally stumbled upon something unexpected. They weren't the only intruders in the military's network. There were others, and they weren't part of the mission, and some of them could be traced to foreign states, even foreign militaries.
One of those countries was a European country, which I can't name. I'm not permitted to name. But we dealt with them saying, look, you're supposed to be an ally, even though you don't speak English. Hint, hint. Don't ever do this again. And they assured us, oh, you will never catch us again. I mean, they weren't supposed to be monitoring our communications, and they claim it was an accident. But, you know, we caught them red-handed and stopped them from doing that. But that was a lesson learned.
Hearing sounds of accordion on the DoD's network was just a sidetrack for the Red Team. Their main objective was exploiting the weak points in the system and letting the defenders know where they are. The strong points were documented too, but those were rare and far between. We know that because in 2017, a part of the report was declassified by the NSA. This was done because some people involved in the exercise wanted to make this fascinating part of the history known to the world. The declassified data included after-action interviews with the participants, who did not miss a chance to point out the good, the bad, and the ugly in the Pentagon's defenses.
This one fella who absolutely deserves a medal. If I can find out who he or she is, I want to shake his or her hand. Marine at Marine Force Pacific actually TA'd what we were doing early on and reconfigured his or her firewall to allow only those people that were necessary in and only out to whoever was necessary. Basically did a minimize based on the threat perception that allowed their mission to continue but shut us off.
And this was the only case of military personnel actually managing to resist the Red Team. In all other cases, the team broke through. In some cases, they were detected, but even that didn't help.
Okay, the detection mechanisms worked well, in my opinion. The reporting did not. What we're seeing now, well after the exercise, is a lot of data that would have pointed towards activity that was compromising Blue being reported now 2 weeks after the events occurred. My analogy is they now know that the horse is out of the barn after it burned down and the ashes are cold.
It was planned for eligible receiver 97 to last 2 weeks, with 2 more weeks optional in case the attackers needed them. As the 4th day of the exercise rolled around, Minahan and his team realized that there was not much else left to do. The DoD was completely humiliated and defeated.
We pretty much had the Blue Team on the run by the 3rd day of the actual exercise, so the need to play all of our capability wasn't there. We only played about 30% of what we could have.
It was time to confront reality and figure out what the next steps were. Eligible Receiver 97 left a bittersweet taste in the Department of Defense. Its immediate consequences required the Red Team, who had worked tirelessly for months, to return to the field and fix all that had been breached during the exercise. Once the burning consequences were addressed, it was time for some more reflection. Recommendations, roadmaps, guidelines, and necessary steps were outlined for the military and the government at large. The NSA also went out of its way to warn the private sector, companies that had the same or even bigger vulnerabilities as the Department of Defense.
There was the establishment then of entities between banks and the federal government for the banks to help disclose to each other that they were being attacked and what they were doing to thwart those attacks. In essence, you had business entities that are competing for the same customer set, now cooperating with each other on how to protect the customer's information. That was unheard of.
Eligible Receiver 97 revealed that the detection mechanisms against threats only worked in some cases, and most importantly, there were no established guidelines on how to respond to an intrusion. The American military, when faced with a coordinated cyber attack, ran around like a headless chicken, not even comprehending that its head was cut off. An enemy state could have launched a Red Dawn-style invasion, and the Pentagon would only notice after the invading forces had set up a canteen under its windows. Talking about the invasion, the third part of the exercise actually involved staging exactly that. The problem is, we know almost nothing about it. The unclassified documents have only glimpses of information on it, and it's very hard to understand what part of the physical attacks were simulated and what part extended to the real world. National pride in the exercise's legend, hijacked by the North Korean Special Forces, was a Marine Corps strategic sealift ship, which might have participated in the exercise. From what we know, there were others.
Many of the floating vessels that we hacked into were U.S. naval vessels or Coast Guard vessels. And so they were legitimate targets because they're DoD assets. But in terms of commercial vessels, there was only one or two, maybe three at the most. I can assure you that our group did not do anything that was not legally authorized. So when you read about civilian ships being hacked, those civilian ships were commercial vessels that we leased to serve as targets. And on board those ships was a communication system called a STU-3. And that was a system that used an encryption technology for communication. The STU, you'll love this, stood for Secure Telephone Unit. Is that imaginative or what?
The military's unwillingness to declassify the full extent of the information is understandable. This exercise did what it was intended to do, finding the weakest links in the defense systems of the United States. In the aftermath, some of those links were fixed. Some of them, maybe not. And some remain difficult to fix to this day.
The biggest obstacle then is currently the biggest obstacle now, and that is denial. Senior leadership, in particular in the business sector, don't want to spend any money on anything that's associated with security, no matter how sophisticated or technical it may be, because the general mindset back in the mid-90s was that cybersecurity is a cost center. It doesn't produce anything. It's a liability. When I would brief CEOs, in the boards of directors, I would get the reaction that cybersecurity is kind of like physical security. It's guns, gates, and guards. It doesn't produce income. It's just an expense center. You know, you only need it when there's a problem. I think there should be more legitimate public discourse about eligible receiver, lessons learned. The lessons learned are we need to be secure. We need to adopt secure technologies. We need to practice secure technologies.
And while this is technically the end of Eligible Receiver 97, it's not quite the end of the story, because this exercise overlaps with another important incident in the history of cybersecurity during the 90s. Several months after Eligible Receiver concluded, the U.S. had come to terms with a threat. And this time it was not a friendly exercise. It was a legitimate adversary, not an ally, and not just a silent observer. But the fascinating tale of Moonlight Maze is a story for another day. Let us know if you'd like to hear it, and we will look into it. Thank you for watching. What's been your favorite No Rollback so far? We have plenty more waiting for you, so check out the playlist, binge them all, and share your favorite. See you soon.